So today's talk is about the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening, and how the 7 factors of awakening in many respects can diametrically oppose the 5 hindrances. So I'll first of all give a bit of an explanation about what the 5 hindrances are, and then go through and talk about how we can work with them. And then I'll talk a little bit about the 7 factors of awakening and point out how the 7 factors of awakening actually work towards counter, in many respects, the 5 hindrances. And then if we get time, maybe I'll focus on a little bit about a couple of the factors related to serenity meditation, in particular concentration, the factor of concentration and the factor of equanimity. Okay, so first of all, the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are that which gets in the road of our meditation practice. It's what blocks progress with our meditation practice. The 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening, in particular, they're subgroups or they're subdomains of the 4th foundation of mindfulness. Many of you seem like you've been here before and heard talks about mindfulness. You probably know about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which are body, the foundation of the body, foundation of feelings or the hedonic quality of experience, the foundation of citta, which means heart-mind, which really generally refers to cognitive and affective qualities that are either caught up in greed, ignorance and hatred, or the opposite of those. Most of them are that. It's just about being aware of the states of mind in general, or states of heart and mind, if you like to call it that way. And the 4th foundation of mindfulness is about more about patterns. It's unlike the first 3. It's not necessarily having an object in mind, like a tangible object in mind to be mindful of. It is about noticing patterns, and there's 5 subdomains in this particular foundation. One of the subdomains are being aware of the 5 hindrances and how to reduce their impact, how to work with them in a way where they reduce the impact of them, or the hindering qualities of them are reduced. Some of the others are another subdomain. In these 5 subdomains is being aware of the 7 factors of awakening, and how you can not only be aware of them but also nourish them and cultivate them. So they're sort of diametrically opposite. But by the way, the other domains in the 4th foundation of mindfulness are being aware of the 6 sense spheres, and in this case, it's like being aware of sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, and mind, being present for that, and just that. I won't go into a big discussion about that right now. Another subdomain is being aware of what we call the 5 khandhas, or the 5, and this says a little sign up there about the 5 aggregates. It's essentially about, the khandhas are aggregates of experience that relate to the self, what we call ourselves. Form, bodily things, for materiality and immateriality, basically. Form, feelings, which are the hedonic quality of experience. Perceptions, mental formations, which is this kind of what we're thinking, like the way we create things with our thoughts, and consciousness, which is basically the knowing part of our mind, if that makes sense. Like a conscious part of our mind. We know things. And the other subdomain in this the four foundations of mindfulness are being aware of the four truths, or the four noble truths. But I also think it's being aware of that pattern of the four truths in general. Four truths are that there is dukkha, or there is unsatisfactoriness, or difficulty, suffering sometimes it's translated as, but it's not as, it can include suffering, but it's not, it's more probably, it's better understood as unsatisfactoriness. Being aware of the, knowing that there is that knowing there's the causes and conditions for that, which is the second truth, knowing freedom from that, which is the third truth, and knowing and being mindful of the fourth truth, which is the way to freedom. So these four truths are essentially two cause-effect relationships: suffering and its causes, and freedom from suffering and its causes. So that's the fifth domain of the fourth foundation of mindfulness. So what we're focusing on in this talk is the hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening. I'm just giving you a context for this. So the five hindrances are, it's often called sensual desire, and I like the way Patrick talks about it as obsessive desire. I think that's quite good. So obsessive desire, obsessively wanting something. The next hindrance is about ill will. Sometimes it's translated as anger, but I'm not so convinced that anger is all that bad. I think that ill will is not so useful, but anger, I feel personally that anger can sometimes be very helpful. And as a psychologist, I've studied the role of emotions, and anger has a very positive role in some cases. When I brought this up in a retreat that I attended recently with Analayo Bhikkhu, who's the author of this book and many other books, Analayo, Bhikkhu Analayo, I questioned about the possibility of there being wholesome anger, and he was adamant, no, not possible. So I'm questionable. I still have room to think that it's possible to have a version that is wholesome. That makes sense. Anyway, so we have the first hindrance is obsessive desire. The second hindrance is ill will. The third hindrance is it's usually translated as sloth and torpor. I prefer to think about it as mental thickness and dullness. The fourth hindrance is restlessness. Sometimes it's called restlessness and worry and agitation. Restlessness is the main way we understand that one. And the fifth hindrance is paralysing doubt. As opposed to skeptical doubt. I think skeptical doubt's quite healthy sometimes. Like you doubt something and you're skeptical about something, so you inquire into it. But paralysing doubt is where we get stuck, not moving forward or back. We're just paralysed in our movements because we just don't know. We can't trust. So they are the five hindrances. The 7 factors of awakening are these, and they're kind of sequential. So I'll give you an overview of the 7 factors of awakening, then I'll come back to it a bit later in the talk. 7 factors of awakening are mindfulness, investigation, energy or effort, then it's joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So 7. So, how do these hindrances block our progress? And, I'll give you a little bit more of an understanding about what they are too. And then when you know what they are, you can look into your own heart and think, when I've experienced this, how has my meditation been? And you can see for yourself how they are hindrances. So the first one, obsessive desire, or often called sensual desire, is about being caught up in wanting something, so much so that we are blinded by not blinded, we are coloured. Our perceptions are coloured by what we want. It's really interesting. There is an analogy in the suttas, and I can read you the analogies, they're wonderful. One analogy compares meditation to seeing one's face in the reflection of a bowl of water. So that's what meditation is. So we see one's face, we see our face in the reflection of water, and the hindrances each have different analogies about that. The analogy for this first one, obsessive desire or sensual desire, is that the water is coloured with dye, and to quote the sutta, it is just as a bowl of water that is mixed with turmeric or ink, becoming turbid, then clear-sighted person who examines the reflection of his or her own face would not see it properly. So, you think about it. And I think a good example about this is how sometimes, we may have fallen in love when we're a teenager. I don't know if anybody fell in love when they were a teenager. It was quite common then. It was easy to do. Many people were attractive, and we'd get totally taken away by that. And you see this person, and all you see is their wonderful qualities, and you think about, I'm going to marry this person and we'll live happily ever after, at the age of 17 or 16 or something like that. And, an adult might look at that and think, oh, no, you're just kind of blinded by your desire. You're coloured by your desire. Probably lust then, back then, so I'm thinking about myself as a 17-year-old. It was often lust. So I'm blinded by that, and I can't see, all I can see is the attractiveness, and I can't see anything else. I can't see the bigger picture, I can't see the reality of that, and I'm blinded or myopic with what's so sexy or attractive or something that's really quite lovely about this person. So that's interesting, because anybody else coming along and seeing me would say that I'm blinded, that I can't see clearly. And if I was to meditate like that, sitting there meditating, attempting to be present with experience, attempting to gain clarity with serenity meditation, or stillness and clarity and calm and peacefulness, or looking into the reality of things, you could see that if I started thinking about the one that I love, she is so beautiful, and may we be happy forever, and I'm not stilling and calming my heart. It's being turned up. If anything, my peacefulness and my clarity and my insight is being hindered. So you can see how that's... Can you all relate to that? You've all been in love at some stage, haven't you? Or it could be that you're just fantasizing about something. And I believe that even though the scholars say that it's just sensual desire, like of the five senses, like wanting something to see and to feel and to taste and to hear and so on, I feel that it could also include the mind, like we could want something that's pleasant, and it's easy to get caught up in those fantasies when we're meditating. It may not necessarily be very sensual, like having sex or chocolate or something like that. It could be something like, in my opinion, it could be something like just completing a chapter in a book. And there's, it's kind of pleasant when, I've written the book and I can't see it there, but it must be, somebody must have borrowed it, because I think I've given you a couple of copies up here. Anyway, I know when I do write, when I actually get round to it, it is quite pleasant to have a complete, chapter or something written. I will often meditate and be thinking about how I can get it, and it's kind of driven by the wanting of something. So that becomes a barrier in my meditation practice. So I'm saying that obsessive desire can be a hindrance, and I think you all know it. I'll tell you the antidotes for these in a little while. The second analogy, the one of ill will, and I'll read you the analogy. It is just as a bowl of water that is heated by fire, greatly heated, boiling and bubbling up, as it's the comparison is that the water is boiling in the bowl. Then a clear-sighted person who examines his reflection or her reflection would not see it properly, if that makes sense. So the hindrance of ill will. Has anybody ever experienced that? I mean, I'm hesitant to say anger again. I think it's ill will, because it's this kind of, not only are you angry, but you are wanting to push something away. It's just a strong push away of something, to get rid of something, to get something out of the road. We waste so much time feeling aversive. It's one of the root causes of suffering: greed, ignorance, and hatred. Hatred is ill will. It's like this pushing away, aversion, condemnation, negative judgment, aggression, resentment, bitterness. It is divisive, meaning that it kind of makes us feel separate from something else. It is contracting. It makes us feel kind of tightly within this, and we've got to defend our boundaries, so to speak. It does not lead to calm and concentration. It does not lead to seeing things clearly, in my experience. It's up for you to experience this. Don't believe everything I say. Experience it for yourself. I experience it as quite painful. And I've told you that I went on a recent retreat. In total it was about 2 months, but one I did I did a solitary retreat on a mountain near Armidale called Mount Yarrawick, which was an awesome place. It was just amazing. And I would usually I would do loving kindness every meditation. And I began my retreat of meditations with saying words, like doing some phrases. Then it shifted to just focusing on the qualities, like getting absorbed in the quality of loving kindness. But the words are really, really helpful. And the words that I did were very traditional phrases. May I be happy, may I be free from enmity, may I be free from troubles of mind and body. I used to say them myself in Pali, to be honest, like Sukhi Homi, Avera Homi, Apyapaja Homi. So that's Apyapaja Homi is may I be may I be free from troubles of mind and body. No, it isn't, sorry. Aniga Homi is that. Apyapaja Homi means may I be free from mental torment. So inner harm, like I torment myself and give myself inner harm. And the last one is Sukhi Atanam Pariharomi, meaning may I be able to protect my own happiness. So when I did those phrases, I would think about, I'd think about and imagine that I was just letting go of the crap that was going on in my head. Like, I don't know if anybody's been alone and solitary, you get a lot of crap going on in your head. Has anybody ever noticed that? If you haven't, maybe you're enlightened, but you get a lot of crap, a lot of stuff going around. And I noticed that I was kind of thinking about some people and being judgmental about them. Oh, how dare they do that? Blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of like it's like having ill will. And it's not very comfortable. So I would think, oh, may I be free from that? Oh, free from that burden of ill will. Because all it hurts is me, unless I go out and act on my ill will and tell someone off. It's only hurting me. May I be free from that? So, look, I'll just give you a clue now. The antidote for ill will is cultivating benevolence. In other words, cultivating loving kindness, compassion. That's the direct antidote. Okay, the third hindrance, sloth and torpor. And this is, so that's verse 2. Sensual desire or obsessive desire. More affective, meaning they're more a kind of related to emotions in many respects, or states of mind. The next two, sloth and torpor, or mental thickness and dullness, and restlessness, are more energetic qualities. They're more related to the way energetically we are. So sloth and torpor is this kind of being really thick. A little bit like when you get a head cold, but not quite. You know, I woke up this morning and I got home from work late last night after seeing a number of people, and I just wanted to blob. You know, my head was thick. I didn't feel like, I knew I had to get ready for today, and I thought I'd better prepare a talk or something like that. Fortunately, I prepared a little bit of it. Then, you know, the day I had off on Tuesday, sorry. And I thought, I better think about it. And I thought, I don't feel like it. And I couldn't think. My head was thick. All I wanted to do was kind of lie down and blob out in front of the TV, to be honest. Not think, be thick. Sloth and torpor is this sense of like being in a fog. You can't see clearly. Sometimes it arises when we're really super tired, and that's not really sloth and torpor, it's just us being tired. Sometimes it arises when we want to avoid things, and our consciousness just makes us thick. We just don't want to look at something. So we just close our eyes and just go to sleep, you know, if that makes sense. It is this feeling of being really thick. And it often manifests as sleepiness. And I've often talked about this on talks about this topic. When I was at IMS in 1984, I did a 3-month retreat there back then. There was a room of about 100 people, and late at night, you'd open your eyes. I was up the back, and you open your eyes and you see like Mexican waves, people kind of dropping forward like this. It'll often manifest like that. But it's not to be confused with sleepiness though, because sometimes we're just sleepy and we need to sleep. Sloth and torpor is more this kind of non-ability to see clearly. It often manifests as sleepiness, but it's not the same as when we're really needing to have a sleep because we're so sleep deprived. So, sloth and torpor, it's an energetic quality. It's like we don't feel like doing anything. And the way to work with it is also energetic. You can actually physically move. You can get up and move around and so on. And the effort with sloth and torpor, and I'm telling you the antidote here now, is to cultivate or create clarity and luminosity, if that's a word. Illuminate things, like make things bright. Put effort into inquiring into something to see the brightness of it. Does that make sense? So when I was feeling like that on retreats, and I tend not to get that hindrance too much, to be honest. Oh no, that's a lie. When I first go on retreats, that's the strongest hindrance. Yeah, I'll take that back. But in a generally my biggest hindrance is the next one, restlessness. But when we first go on retreats, like usually the first week, or at least the first couple of days, mostly, when I've gone on retreats, I just go and sit down and go, I can hardly concentrate. I'm just wanting to go to sleep. And I usually do sleep a lot. And it kind of balances it out somehow. So the way I've worked with it when I've been beyond that and I've had that hindrance is to really inquire into the nature of what's happening. And coming back to that example of, when you're experiencing sloth and torpor and you notice your head going forward like that with that Mexican wave phenomena, one way I work with it was to pay a lot of attention to the feeling of my head going forward. Like bringing a lot of inquiry into that, clarifying it, and seeing it clearly. Okay? So, really sharpening my awareness. And that would brighten my mind up. Of course, you can do other things like walking rather than sitting, especially rather than lying down meditation. By the way, you know that you can all lie down here if you want. If you start to snore, I will come along and wriggle your toes and fingers to wake you up. Okay? So can you see how that can be a hindrance? I mean, it's pretty obvious, it really, isn't it? You're trying to wake up and you're actually going to sleep. So, and the analogy that they use in here's the analogy. It is just as a bowl of water that is covered with slimy moss and algae. Then a clear-sighted person who examines the reflection of his or her own face would not see it properly. That's the analogy for mental thickness and dullness, algae and moss on top of the bowl. You're looking at all, that's all you're seeing. Okay, so restlessness. Restlessness is an energetic quality again, and this is probably one of my biggest hindrances. It is this, physically it's like you can't sit still. You want to move all the time. A little bit ADHD-ish, if you know what that is. So, like agitated and kind of shifting around all the time. And mentally it's like your mind is going from one thing to another. Or it's been caught up with trains of thought. It's being pulled away by fantasies and ideas and trains of thought that just are not related to what you're doing. Even though the trains of thought may be kind of useful trains of thought, when you're sitting and meditating, for example, on a retreat, and you're thinking about how you can, fix up the pathway down the side of the house or whatever it is, you're not concentrating. Your mind's going off. And it's like your attention doesn't really sort of settle. one comparison to restlessness and this lack of concentration with restlessness is like, you know how you throw a stone into ash that's like from a fireplace and it just goes up and doesn't settle anywhere? It's like that. It sort of doesn't settle anywhere. Your mind, you don't have the strength of and the power of concentration to see anything very clearly. The analogy is, well, I'll read it to you. It is just as a bowl of water that is stirred, impelled, and whirled by the wind. In other words, you've got a bowl of water, and the wind's blowing, and there's it's not still, it's kind of ruffled. Then a clear-sighted person who examines the reflection of his or her own face will not see it properly. That's right. It's like a cork on water rather than a stone dropping down to the bottom of a stream or a creek. It's like a cork on the top. It sort of just doesn't go very deep. I'll tell you the antidote, the direct antidote for this one. It is working on calming and settling your mind. Being able to focus on something, for example, although not always, but just being able to stabilise your attention. Often I will say something like, well, rather than sitting, if you're restless, rather than sitting, go for a walk, look at a view. Engage in something that's enjoyable so that your attention will just naturally go into that. So if I'm really restless, what I do is I walk. I go for walking, fast walking, or ride my bicycle, or I'll sit if I'm sitting, if I can stop moving my body enough for me to sit, I'll sit and look at a view, or the leaves that are moving. I'll bring my attention onto something that's quite easy to focus on, something quite pleasant, and do it. You could even have really cold showers or something like that. That will get your attention very easily. So that's restlessness and worry and doubt. Paralysing doubt. I'll give you the analogy first. Oh, it doesn't have it. But I know what it is. Oh yeah, here it is. Just as a bowl of water that has been put in a dark place. The bowl of water is put in a dark place. You still can't see your reflection because it's dark. This is kind of enlightening for me. I always thought about this fifth hindrance as having like the water turning to mud. And it's kind of thick to work through and you still can't see your reflection. But I went on that retreat. It was a study retreat with Analayo Bhikkhu. And I just realised that it's not mud at all. It's putting the bowl in a dark place. And the way we work with that one is essentially to, the way they talk about it in the sutras is to contemplate dependent arising. I don't know if many of you know what dependent arising is. Some of you may know. Dependent arising is the way things come to be and the way things also change and disappear. It is this cause-effect relationship, but it's not like a progressive line. It's just it arises all at once. Like because this is, that is. Because that is not, this is not. It's pretty complex to understand, but basically what they're saying here is if you have paralysing doubt, if you're not sure about what you're doing, whether it's right or not, or if you're not sure about yourself, or you're not sure about meditation, or you're chronically uncertain about things, you're chronically procrastinating about things, then these are examples of paralysing doubt. It's like we never get enough confidence to move forward. And the antidote, or the opposite of paralysing doubt, is confidence, or trust, or faith. Faith that something is going to work out. Faith that what you're doing is the right thing. Confidence that you can do it. Trust that it's actually workable and doable. So the direct antidote for this is to contemplate, in Pali paticca samuppada, or contemplate dependent arising, meaning that you start to examine the way things are. You start to examine cause-effect relationships between things. You reflect, you consider, you think about, for example, or you seek out understanding about something, so that you can feel confident that it works. Does that make sense to you guys? Actually, I've told you the antidotes, the direct antidotes for all of them except sensual desire or obsessive desire. So I'll tell you that now. The antidote for obsessive desire is to contemplate the unattractiveness of something. I know it's interesting because the word in Pali, and I'm not a Pali scholar by any means, but I do know a few Pali words. The meditation that's often described for this particular hindrance is a suppa. And sometimes when it's translated, it looks at it's like looking at the disgusting nature of things, or the repelling and disgusting nature of things. But I think in actual fact, it means not being sucked into misperceiving beauty in something that's not necessarily beautiful. So if we're coming back to that obsession as a 17 or 16-year-old with someone that we're lusting after, and all we're seeing is the object as a lustful object rather than seeing the big picture, what we do is we pay attention to the whole person rather than just narrow-mindedly looking at that which is attractive. We see the whole thing, the big picture. So if you actually, I've just thought of something now. I gave up chocolate about 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that, because it wasn't good for my psoriasis. I get psoriasis. I just stopped chocolate. I used to have a lot of chocolate. I used to eat it every day. Good chocolate. Good chocolate. So I must admit that when I first gave it up, probably for a couple of months, I would, especially after lunch, when you're kind of feeling a bit... And I usually have a kip every day after lunch. And after the kip, it's nice to kind of brighten yourself up with a piece of chocolate. It used to be nice to have it brighten up with a piece of chocolate. Just a nice piece. So if I was meditating and I was kind of like this, I might start to think about, chocolate, chocolate, when's the next chocolate? And that's a hindrance. And the way I actually work with it, in reality, when I gave up chocolate, because it was my only vice. I mean, no other vices other than chocolate. I just thought about how it was not so nice all the time. I thought about when I'd had too much chocolate, and the way it feels when you have too much chocolate, even if it's good quality dark chocolate. Or I thought about if I eat chocolate, it's really nice and nothing, it's really lovely, and then I think, I can have another one next day. So I have another one next day, and I have another one. It takes about 3 days for me to react. And then it reacts like an inflammation. I have an inflammation in my psoriasis. It gets red and itchy and really uncomfortable. Very unattractive. So I think of the unattractiveness of the chocolate. I think, the long-term outcome of this is itchiness and redness. And the delight that I find in chocolate lasts moments, whereas the uncomfortability lasts like sometimes weeks. So one can contemplate the unattractiveness of something. That's a good hindrance for when you're caught up in sensual desire. All right. Okay, so now the 7 factors of awakening. And the 7 factors of awakening are really cool. I'll just repeat them. The first factor is mindfulness. Being present and aware, and remembering to be attentive to experience. And not just being aware, but having it manifest in a context of what we call the Eightfold Path, meaning a right view, a right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. It's within that context. One way I described that when someone asks me, what does mindfulness mean? I usually say, remembering to be attentive with care and discernment. So that encompasses those qualities of right intention, right view, and also the qualities of wisdom. So mindfulness is the first start. When you remember to be attentive to something and you keep doing it, you start to practice mindfulness. It is, I won't say uplifting, but clarifying in and of itself. So the first factor is mindfulness. The second factor on the 7 factors of awakening, these are factors that are associated with waking up, enlightenment. The second factor is investigation. Usually said investigation into dharmas, which means investigation into experiences of things. So investigation here is like inquiry. What's going on here? So we start to practice mindfulness, we're remembering to be attentive, then we're inquiring into it. We're seeing into the nature of this experience that we're being attentive to, whether it's the breath or the way our feet feel when we're walking, or whether it's a state of mind that's arising, or a feeling, like whether something's pleasant, unpleasant, or neither, or whether it's a pattern that we've got, like a tendency that we get caught up in, a cyclic reactive pattern, for example. With mindfulness, we're remembering to be attentive, then we're inquiring into it. And that leads to a kind of energetic enthusiasm, like a zeal to keep going. The next factor on the 7 factors is energy, zeal, effort. And there are four efforts. The 4 efforts are these: recognizing the energy behind recognizing unwholesome patterns or unwholesome actions or thoughts and behaviors, and stopping it. Or unhelpful behaviors, and just stopping that. The effort behind preventing those unwholesome states of mind and behaviors and actions and so on manifesting or arising. So there's 2 efforts. The third effort is to the energy behind arising or nourishing and bringing up wholesome qualities or wholesome actions, wholesome states of mind, helpful states of mind that are, and behaviors and actions that are leading to where you want to go. Awakening, for example. And the 4th great effort is being able to maintain wholesome states of mind, if that makes sense. Yeah. Being able to maintain the effort behind, or the energy behind, being able to maintain being on a helpful and wholesome path. So they're the 4 efforts. And, we practice mindfulness, then we start to inquire into it, and that brings about kind of this energy and effort to... it's kind of like an enthusiasm in some respects. Enthusiasm to practice this path. Then what happens, and it leads to joy. Joy. It's wonderful. We have, when I can see that I'm actually, when I do, loving kindness, and I go, may I be free from enmity. And then, we're out in life and we're about to kind of get caught up in something that's kind of, it feels like ill will or enmity, and we note it, we see it with great effort. We say, I don't have to feed into that. I'll just step back from that. I won't let that arise. I'm not going to feed into that. I'm aware of it. I can see it. I use effort. That brings me joy. Can you see that? Yeah. So that's the 4th factor of awakening, joy. When we have joy, and I'm kind of tipping over now, I'll just come back a bit. The first 3 factors are very much related to insight meditation. Mindfulness, investigation, and energy, very much related to insight meditation. How I talked about insight and serenity at the beginning of the day? The next 3 are very much related to serenity meditation. Joy is one of the factors, one of the jhanic factors actually, the factors of having highly concentrated states. Joy, when you experience joy, it's often called rapture. It's like the energy behind, it's easy to focus on, and it gives rise to other states of mind, in particular happiness, contentment, equanimity. And it is the first factor, it's one of the factors in creating highly concentrated states of mind. And highly concentrated states of mind are also related to great tranquility, serenity, calm, peacefulness. So the next factor on the 7 factors of awakening is tranquility. This calmness, this sereneness, this stillness, this peacefulness. Then the next factor of awakening is concentration. And I mentioned before, concentration is a way we translate samadhi, and probably a better way of understanding that is, if you break that word up, samadhi, it means bringing together, gathering, and placing in one spot. So we gather our attention and place it in. Another way of explaining it is non-distractibility. Like we're no longer kind of caught up in all this stuff. Our attention is just sort of staying where it's put. And it gets deeper and deeper into that. We get more and more absorbed into that. So concentration is the 6th factor of awakening. And the more we focus, the more we allow ourselves to become absorbed into whatever we're focusing on, which is one of the functions of concentration or samadhi. What happens is that our minds get very still, very calm, very quiet, and everything else gets into perspective. We have great equanimity. It's like we're cocooned from the hassles of the world, but we're very aware of the world. We're very aware of everything, but we're cocooned from the proliferations of thoughts. We're cocooned from the hassles. We're cocooned from all these worldly things that can serve to kind of pull us here and there. We become very centred, peaceful, still, a deep sense of quietude, and that's equanimity. Now, at the beginning of, a bit earlier on, I said that the first 3 factors of the 7 factors of awakening are very much related to insight meditation, which they are. The next 3 are very much related to the next 3 being joy, tranquility and concentration, are very much related to serenity meditation. And equanimity is out there. Equanimity is the result of both insight and serenity meditation. It's one of the it's features in the 4th jhana, which are highly concentrated states. Equanimity is the feature of the 4th jhana, so that's via the concentration route. And if we go via the insight route, which is like looking into phenomena, understanding life, understanding our own mind, and so on, then what results from that is great peacefulness. And that's peacefulness is equanimity again. So we can go via insight route or serenity route. And with the 7 factors of awakening, we have it as the culmination of all these factors. Does that make sense? So, I'm almost finished. The way they work together, the 7 factors and the 5 hindrances, actually, can you see how they work together? The 5 hindrances are affective problems, energetic issues, and also cognitive issues. Doubt is like a cognitive, it's like the way we're thinking about something. The 7 factors of awakening, the first 3 will address the hindrances through insight. The next 3 will address the hindrances through serenity. And the last one, equanimity, will just address all of them. Sometimes, if you're cultivating one factor, it may not be good for one of the hindrances. Like, for example, if you're having the hindrance of sloth and torpor, then cultivating serenity, cultivating tranquility and concentration, and even equanimity may not be so good. In that case, you need to cultivate investigation and even joy. So, joy because it's uplifting, and mindfulness. And if you're over-energized, like if you're restless, then probably the better ones to cultivate would be the serenity factors of awakening, such as joy will help with restlessness, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So that's some ways so sometimes the hindrances are understood as being overexcited, like energized, and also laxity, like not having enough kind of energy, like sloth and torpor, like thick. So you can use these various factors to counter what is needed. Does that make sense? Okay. I better finish it. Going overtime as usual, but not too much overtime. I notice that when I go overtime, what happens is I get really energized, and everyone else is kind of, the audience is kind of dropping off, falling to sleep, and they'll be very polite and they say, "Do you understand?" "Oh yes, we understand." And they're falling off to sleep. Okay, so I'll stop the recording.